but not everyone is celebrating Canada's 150th year since Confederation. Gregory Schofield certainly isn't. He is a Red River Métis poet and an assistant professor of English at Laurentian University. We've reached him in Sudbury, Ontario. So while we see a lot of scenes with people with flags and wearing red, and you have made a decision not to celebrate Canada Day, why did you make that decision?
Well, I made that decision. First of all, I'll say danse to everybody out there. That is greetings in the Cree language. I just want to acknowledge everybody out there today. The reason I've chosen not to celebrate is that, I don't think that when we're looking at the 150th birthday of Canada's Confederation, we're not taking into account all of the history that has come before that. And we're not really taking into account the legacy of the history that has been left to Indigenous people since Confederation.
And so you decided to abstain from celebrating, certainly. So how are you now marking this day?
Well, really, I'm just marking this day in a very quiet way. One of the things that I'm quite active on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter. I know last night I had tweeted out, 4 historical figures from history. I had tweeted them to Justin Trudeau. I had tweeted the image of Louis Riel, of Gabriel Dumont, of Poundmaker, of Chief Big Bear, both Cree chiefs from Saskatchewan. I would really like for people to, I think what's important when we're looking at celebrating Canada's 150th year of Confederation, I think it's really important that Canadians take the time and take this opportunity to really find out on whose nation's lands they are residing.
Now, you made mention there that part of what you're doing to mark this day, for example, is using social media to reach out to the Prime Minister. You said that. And so earlier today, we know that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau addressed the issue of Aboriginal people not celebrating Canada Day. So let's quickly have a listen to what he had to say.
I think everyone needs to understand that even as we celebrate, people have different perspectives, and that there will be a large number of Indigenous people who don't feel like celebrating and who indeed want to use this opportunity where we come together to reflect on our past and think about our future to remind us that we have a lot of work to do in the future.
So now, Gregory, do you agree with that assessment? Is it a fair assessment?
It is a fair assessment, and insofar as him and his wife Sophie visiting the teepee, I believe that, I want to believe that he's done that from a heartfelt place, that he's done that from a good place. But of course, again, it is a symbolic gesture. It is a gesture on his behalf. It's a gesture on behalf of the Canadian government. But really, what is important is the action. What is important is, clean water for communities that don't have access to clean water. What is important is rectifying the issue and finding ways of healing issues such as missing and murdered Indigenous women in this country. What is important is looking and finding ways of, looking at the high rate of suicide of our young people in remote communities. What is important is looking at the number of our young children in care.
So you mentioned there that, there was some symbolism with the Prime Minister coming into the teepee and addressing the protesters. And you've listed off some of the actions that you'd certainly like to see taken in dealing with the inquiry into murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, clean water, and also suicides. But how hopeful are you about seeing results and having a new and improved relationship?
Well, I guess what I can say is that I'm pessimistically optimistic. I have been optimistic about the missing and murdered Indigenous, the National Inquiry, or the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. I come to that issue from a very personal place, having lost my auntie in 1998 to homicide. So of course that issue affects me personally. So I'm optimistic that change will come. I'm optimistic that healing will come, but I'm very pessimistic insofar as really what's been happening.
Well, thank you so much for your insights today. We appreciate them. Gregory Schofield is a Red River Métis poet and an assistant professor of English at Laurentian University. We spoke to him from Sudbury, Ontario. Now stay with us. You're watching CBC News Network. We'll be back in just a moment.